Hey guys, tonight we're going back to the 1700s. But not to the battles or the tea parties or the powdered wigs. Nope, tonight, we're crouched by a dying hearth, staring into a cracked wooden bowl, trying to coax warmth and sleep from the gloopy, slightly burned heap of cornmeal mush that'll have to count as dinner. Smoke drifts lazily from the chimney. The floor is stone and freezing against your bare soles. Outside, it's pitch black, no streetlights, no glow from a neighbor's porch, because it's 1763 and electricity hasn't even had its first awkward dance with public opinion yet. You pull your shawl tighter, spooning hot mush from the bowl while listening for wolves. Or worse, drunken neighbors staggering home from the tavern. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and the local time. I always read the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mush clings to your spoon like regret. Made from simple ground corn boiled in water or milk, it's the kind of dish born from necessity and kept alive by repetition. Sometimes it's called hasty pudding, though it's not particularly hasty and only loosely resembles pudding. The texture is somewhere between baby food and wallpaper paste, but when your hands are numb and your belly's empty, it's a lifeline. You blow on a spoonful, and steam swirls up like breath from some ghost of dinner past. It tastes slightly sweet if there's molasses mixed in, or painfully bland if not. Salt was precious, and sugar even more so. So odds are you're chewing through this with the desperate optimism of someone who's very tired and mildly disappointed. Here's the thing, in colonial America, dinner usually happened in the early afternoon. Supper, the evening meal, was lighter, if it happened at all. Depending on how rural or poor you were, that supper might be cold leftovers, or mush like this, cooked low and slow from what was scraped together after sundown. And you made it count. This was pre-refrigeration. Leftovers had a rapidly ticking clock. The hearth fire was central, not just for cooking, but for light and heat. Everything orbited around that hearth, especially after dark. The floor creaks behind you. Could be a sibling sneaking an extra bowl. Or a mouse. You don't turn around, you just eat faster. Sometimes, if you were lucky or seasonally strategic, you'd stir in bits of bacon grease saved from earlier. Just enough to whisper flavor before vanishing into the bland mass. Cornmeal itself was a staple, cheap, locally grown, and easy to store. And it wasn't just for mush. It became Jonna cakes, spoon bread, or even a quick fry-up if you had lard and thyme. But at bedtime, when the fire was low and your body was aching, mush was what stuck to your ribs best. You stare into the fire and think about the weirdest thing you heard today, that some folks up in New England were adding actual beer to their mush. Yep, ale porridge. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or just a local oddity that spread like culinary gossip. Either way, you wonder if it helped people sleep or just gave them really creative dreams. You pull the shawl tighter around your shoulders. A draft sneaks under the door. Insects might be nesting in the thatch above. You hear the flutter of wings. Hopefully it's not a bat again. A spoon clinks on an empty bowl. Yours. You already finished it. Now, you eye the pot. There's more, but it cooled into a strange gelatinous slab. You debate whether to reheat it or just gnaw a corner off like it's colonial Jell-O. You sigh and reach for the ladle. There's a kind of rhythm to this life. Chop wood, light fire, boil mush, eat. Sleep. Try not to die of exposure. Occasionally, someone brings back apples or salted pork. That's a good week. But mostly, especially in winter, it's this: cornmeal, water, and an iron pot older than you. You shift on the stool, your joints creaking like the house beams. You remember your neighbor bragging about adding maple syrup to their mush. Imported from the trees themselves, he said, like a maple tap was a status symbol. You rolled your eyes at the time. Now, you wonder if you could sneak some from the pantry tomorrow. In some households, kids went to bed hungry. Supper wasn't guaranteed. If you were a laborer, a servant, or just particularly unlucky with your crops that year, this bowl was a luxury. Something to warm you while your fingers cracked from cold and your breath fogged the air inside the house. Outside, a coyote howls. Or is it a dog? Hard to tell. Either way, you're staying in. A century later, people might romanticize this scene. Rustic charm, they'll call it. Back to basics living. But right now, in 1763, your back hurts from carrying wood, your fingers are blistered from stirring mush, and your stomach is already asking for breakfast. But you do feel a little warmer. The mush helped. It always does. Even when it tastes like wet plaster and childhood disappointment. As you shuffle toward your straw mattress, you whisper a half-prayer that tomorrow's supper might involve something crunchy. Or chewy. Or chewable. Anything, really. And as you tuck in, the taste of cornmeal lingers like a stubborn memory. The door creaks open, and a gust of cold air rushes in, thick with the sour-sweet smell of horses and spilled ale. You're inside a tavern now, though not by choice. Maybe you're traveling. Maybe your own hearth went out and you needed warmth. Or maybe you just sold something, eggs, candles, or a cured hide, and had enough coins jingling in your pocket to afford supper at someone else's fire. It's loud. Smoky. The beams are low, the table's sticky, and everyone's voice competes with someone else's. A fiddler plays something upbeat in the corner, though no one's paying attention except a boy asleep against the wall with soot on his nose. You're guided to a bench by a toothless man with a ragged apron and what may or may not be soup on his shirt. He mutters about stew and bread, and you nod. You don't ask what kind of stew. You already know the answer. It arrives in a pewter bowl that clinks like it's seen things, wars, weddings, and definitely a bar fight or three. The stew is hot, brown, and unidentifiable. That's how you like it. Chunks of potato, maybe some carrot, and something stringy that could be beef, squirrel, or last week's leftover goose. No one cares. It's hot. And that's the magic of tavern stew. It fills your belly and numbs your thoughts. A tankard follows, thick with slats bound in iron, sloshing with hard cider or small beer. Water's risky, especially in the city. Beer's safer. You lift it to your lips and taste malt, yeast, and a little funk, like someone stored it too close to the cheese. You glance around. The other tables are crowded with locals, merchants, sailors, farmers coming from muddy roads. One man's asleep on his plate. Another is carving something into the wood with a spoon. You're lucky tonight. You got here early, so your stew still has heat. Sometimes, supper is what's left in the pot after everyone else. The stew of many yesterdays, as some joke. But this bowl's decent, flavored with onion, maybe a bay leaf if the cook was feeling fancy. Fun fact time, some taverns served a dish called pepper pot, a stew brought by enslaved Afro-Caribbeans, made with tripe, hot peppers, and greens. It became famous in cities like Philadelphia. Spicy, steamy, and suspiciously chewy, just how you'd want to end a brutal day. Historians still argue whether tavern menus truly reflected local tastes or just whatever scraps could be stewed into plausible edibility. Either way, it's a reminder that flavor was rarely the priority, warmth and calories were king. A fire crackles behind you. The hearth is massive, easily wide enough to roast a whole hog, which it may have, if you'd arrived last week during the county fair. Now, it's mostly charred logs and a kettle of something bubbling ominously for tomorrow. You dunk your bread in the stew. It's coarse, dense, probably rye or barley, flour that traveled less distance and cost fewer shillings than refined wheat. There are crumbs under your nails now, and the crust scratches your gums in that way you secretly enjoy. A man 2 tables down lifts a sausage from his plate and waves it triumphantly like he just caught it mid-hunt. You consider asking what he paid, but decide the mystery adds flavor. Here's something weird. Some taverns offered bed and board but not blankets. You'd get food and a place to lie down, but bring your own warmth. Forget your wool wrap, and you'd sleep fully clothed beside strangers who may or may not smell like boiled cabbage. You overhear a woman complaining her stew had bones in it. The barkeep shrugs. That's how you know it's real, he says. You smile to yourself. He's not wrong. Even in the backwoods, a roadside tavern could be a beacon, especially in winter. A place to warm up, dry out, and eat something, anything, before sleep. And if you're really fortunate, you sleep upstairs, in a straw-stuffed mattress with the faint scent of stew still clinging to your clothes. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve. There are no napkins here. Someone laughs too hard and spills cider. No one reacts. The dog under the table perks up. Back then, supper was less a meal and more a last-ditch effort to fill yourself before the long night. You didn't eat to enjoy, you ate so you wouldn't wake up hungrier. Or colder. Or dead. But there was comfort in it, too. In that dark room, with the heat of strangers and the thud of tankards, the food almost tasted like safety. Like ritual. Like a brief pause in the chaos of weather, work, and war. You sip the last of the beer. It's flat now, but still better than the water in the horse trough out front. The barkeep asks if you want another bowl. You think of your dwindling coins, then nod. After all, who knows when you'll get stew this hot again? The fire's nearly out, the shadows stretch long across the packed dirt floor, and you're slicing bread that could double as a brick. It's late, not just sun's down late, but your muscles are threatening mutiny late. You're still in your clothes, your back sore from chores, and you smell faintly of hay, ash, and regret. Welcome to the end of another day in 18th century America. The bread is a rough, molasses-laced loaf, dense, chewy, and darker than the candle stub flickering beside it. You made it 3 days ago, and now it's tough enough to require both a serrated knife and a little emotional support. You saw off a slice and chew slowly, like your jaw's the only thing keeping your brain awake. This isn't dessert. It's fuel. One last hit of carbs before the long haul of night. Outside, the wind whines through the shutters. There's no insulation, just planks and prayers. You tuck your feet beneath your skirt or breeches and lean closer to the candle, watching the wax tremble every time you exhale. This bread, often called brown bread or journey cake depending on where and how it was made, is your lifeline. It's got cornmeal, rye, maybe some wheat if you were blessed at the mill this week. But the real treat? Molasses. Imported from the West Indies, molasses was thick, sticky, and suspiciously affordable, thanks to, well, systemic exploitation and the triangle trade. But tonight, you're just grateful for the sweetness. It clings to your teeth and cuts through the taste of old flour and exhaustion. Here's a curious thing. Many colonists believed molasses was healthy. They thought it cleaned the blood and improved the skin. Historians still argue whether this was genuine belief or just a convenient excuse to dump it into everything edible. Either way, you're not mad about it. You sip from a clay cup, maybe milk, if the cow behaved. Maybe cider, if you bartered well. Either way, it's lukewarm and comforting. The candle flame bobs, and your stomach rumbles softly. Not from hunger, but from fatigue. You think about the chores you squeezed in after dusk, feeding chickens, turning butter, patching a hole in your only pair of stockings. Bedtime isn't a relaxing shutdown, it's just where the chores finally lose their battle against your bones. You remember a neighbor boasting about her new spider pan, basically a cast iron skillet with legs, designed to sit in the coals. She swore her evening bread baked faster with it. You smiled politely, knowing full well your hearth couldn't spare the wood to experiment. The bread is nearly gone. It's gritty between your teeth, thanks to rough ground meal and the occasional bit of stone from careless milling. Your tongue is numb in places, but the molasses sticks to the roof of your mouth like a final goodnight. A rooster crows prematurely. You throw it a glare it can't see through the wall. You're not done with today. Not yet. Because some nights, after the last slice, there's still more to do. Sewing a torn hem. Repacking the hearth ashes. Checking the root cellar for leaks. You drag your feet, literally, across the floorboards and think longingly of your straw mattress. Some households had supper cloths, thin covers laid on tables after the final meal to signal the kitchen's closed. Yours is a dishcloth draped over the bread loaf in case the mice get ideas. You pat it down and listen for skitters in the rafters. Weird historical note, in some parts of rural New England, people believed eating too much before bed invited nightmares. The devil sleeps in a full stomach, one preacher wrote. You look at your belly, still half empty, and figure your dreams are safe from possession tonight. A knock at the door jolts you. Probably a neighbor needing something. Or someone lost. Or a fox again. You pretend not to hear. It's late. You're done. The candle gutters. You feel around in the dim and find the end of the loaf, wrapping it in cloth like a relic. The molasses glistens faintly in the dark. Tomorrow you'll slice the heel, maybe toast it over coals if there's time. Maybe not. Sometimes, bread is the last thing you taste before sleep. Not fancy, not soft, but steady. Predictable. Yours. You climb into bed without washing up. You already know there'll be flour under your nails and molasses on your sleeve. You turn toward the wall and close your eyes to the faint sound of wind and creaking beams. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll dream of butter. The wind howls like a bored ghost outside your cabin, and you're still hunched over the fire, spoon in hand, fishing out the last slick dumpling from a pot that's been boiling since midday. Welcome to the soft, starchy comfort of a backwoods evening, where dinner means dumplings, and dumplings mean survival. They're not the fluffy biscuit-style ones you might imagine. These are drop dumplings, dense, doughy lumps made of flour, salt, and just enough water to hold their shape before they're plunked into a pot of bubbling broth. No herbs, no fluff. Just the kind of belly ballast you need when tomorrow's forecast includes chopping wood, chasing pigs, and surviving another Frontier Tuesday. You take a bite. It's steaming, sticky, and tastes faintly like meat, even though there hasn't been any in the house since last Sunday. That's the secret. The broth's been reused all week, absorbing the ghosts of whatever wandered into it: salt pork on Monday, onions on Wednesday, and something you're still trying to forget from Friday. You slurp quietly, careful not to spill. Waste is not a concept, it's a sin. The dumplings thud softly in your belly, and for the first time all day, you feel anchored. Not full, exactly, but grounded. Historical reality check. Dumplings were a go-to for poor colonial families. Cheap, filling, and stretchable across a whole household. Add a bit of lard if you had it. Maybe suet, if your cow had recently volunteered. In the South, enslaved cooks added their own touch: cornmeal versions, fried twists, and even sweet ones boiled with molasses. These traditions snuck their way into plantation kitchens and lingered long after the Revolution. Historians still argue whether dumplings were a purely European import or a Creole evolution of Old and New World starches. Either way, your mouth doesn't care. It's warm. Outside, the forest creaks. Trees rub their elbows together in the wind, and something rustles near the coop. You ignore it. Your hands are too dough-sticky to deal with raccoons right now. You reach for a wooden spoon, your good one, the one with the scorch mark on the handle. You made it yourself after snapping the last one mid-stir during a particularly aggressive gruel incident. The broth in the pot glimmers faintly. It's thin tonight, stretched with turnip water and a dash of cider vinegar for tang. A floating scallion stalk blinks up at you like, yes, this counts as dinner. Barely. Your stomach agrees. You stir slowly, folding the last dumpling under. They look like little islands in a sea of liquid guesswork. You remember how your mother used to say, If it sinks and doesn't scream, it's edible. Reassuring. And here's the thing, on nights like this, the dumplings are more than just food. They're company. Each one a little lump of effort. Flour measured by feel, not cup. Salt added by memory, not recipe. Stirred with hope. Cooked with fatigue. You scrape the bottom of the pot, getting the good bits, the starchy clumps that never quite became dumplings, but aren't broth either. The gray zone. The soft glue of late-night survival. Quirky culinary footnote, in some households, they'd reuse leftover dumplings in the morning, fried in bacon grease or mashed into porridge. One traveler even wrote about a family that crumbled cold dumplings into cider and called it bread punch. Historians still debate whether that was brilliant or just desperate. Your fingers are slick with dough. You lick one, and it tastes like salt, smoke, and a little ash. There's always ash. You gave up trying to keep the hearth clean years ago. Fire has its own logic. The cabin smells like flour and steam, with a whisper of onion. It's not the scent of luxury, but of effort. Of someone trying. Someone like you. You glance at the fire. One log left. Just enough to keep the pot warm till you drag yourself to bed. You poke it with the iron, watching sparks spit up like fireflies fleeing the conversation. You ladle the last of the dumplings into a bowl, clay, chipped, and full of character. You sit cross-legged near the hearth, wrapping your shawl tighter, and eat slowly, like this bowl has to last not just the night, but the memory of this night. Because let's be honest, sometimes, late-night dumplings are the only soft thing in a hard week. One last bite. You savor it. Then you tip the bowl to drink the broth directly, letting it burn a trail down your throat and into your chest. It's not elegant, but it's deeply earned. You place the bowl beside you, brush flour from your lap, and think of tomorrow, of breakfast, and chopping, and boiling water again. There's always water to boil. You lie down on your mattress, straw and old quilts, and feel your full, heavy belly press into the fabric. It's a good feeling. A sleepy feeling. The dumplings are doing their job. They say a warm supper is the best sedative. Tonight, you agree. You're sitting on a creaky wooden stool, elbows on the table, watching as a small wedge of cheese sweats under the heat of a nearby lantern. It's not much, just a sliver, really, but tonight, it's everything. Cheese and apples. That's what you're working with. And believe it or not, it's a solid end to the day. The apple in your hand is small, bruised near the stem, and a little shriveled around the edges. It's a winter keeper, maybe a Roxbury russet or a Baldwin, grown tough, meant to last in a root cellar until the snow melts. You bite in, and the skin resists just long enough to remind you it's been hiding in the cold for months. It's tart. Sharp. A little mealy, sure, but still sweet enough to make you smile. You slice off a thin wedge and match it with a bit of cheese, hard, yellow, and crumbly, likely made back in September. Maybe even earlier. That's how you end your night, pairing preserved sweetness with aged sharpness, a marriage of what survived. This isn't fancy fare, but it's familiar. There's a reason apple and cheese was a colonial staple. When everything else rotted or molded or got nibbled by the mice, apples and cheese kept showing up. Like your most reliable friend. Historical nugget alert: 18th century Americans prized apples, not just for eating, but for drying, baking, and fermenting into cider. Cider was often safer than water. Cheese, meanwhile, was a form of edible preservation magic. Milk turned solid, salted, and stored. Every bite reminded you of the cow, the churn, the cloth-wrapped will aging slowly in the cellar. Historians still argue whether these bedtime pairings were born from necessity or intentional pairing. Some say the mix of acid and fat helped digestion before sleep. Others say it was just what happened to be left. You sip cider from a tin mug. It's warm now, intentionally. You heated it near the fire, adding a clove and a curl of orange peel if you felt fancy. Wassail, they'd call it in December. Tonight, it's just you, warm cider, and the sounds of the cabin settling around you. The fire's low. You've banked the coals, trying to stretch the heat until morning. The cheese glows softly in the lantern light, and the apple looks a little like a candle stub, half-eaten and full of promise. You think back to your childhood, when your grandmother would whisper that eating cheese too late would bring mice to your dreams. It was nonsense, of course, but you still listen for squeaks. You cut another sliver of cheese, stack it on a wedge of apple, and pop the whole thing into your mouth. Sweet. Sharp. Perfect. There's something about the balance. You didn't know it back then, but these two foods complement each other chemically. The fats in cheese mellow the acidity of the apple, and the apple's brightness cuts the cheese's richness. It's like an 18th century charcuterie board, but without the fancy name or Instagram photo. You smile, thinking about that. If only they knew. Here's a quirky detail: some families peeled and dried apple skins near the fire, then used them to flavor cider or tea. Others fed them to livestock or themselves. Waste not. Even the cores were tossed into vinegar barrels, fermenting into homemade apple cider vinegar. The cheese, meanwhile, tells its own story. You remember making it, heating milk in the big kettle, adding rennet from a dried calf's stomach. Don't think about it too hard, stirring slowly, pressing curds, and then wrapping them in linen. Aging them in the coolest corner of the cellar, flipping the wheels every few days like patient little moons. Now, all that effort is in this bite. A whisper of salt, a hint of barn. A reminder of summer's milk on a winter night. You finish the apple. The core's brown, soft in spots, and you consider tossing it outside, but you're not in the mood for raccoons tonight. Instead, you place it carefully on the hearthstones. Maybe it'll shrivel into a little sculpture by morning. The cheese is nearly gone, and you drag the last crumb through the cider on your plate. A soft scraping sound. Your fingers are a little sticky from apple juice. You wipe them on your apron, then pause. A mouse skitters in the rafters. You tilt your head and whisper, "Not tonight, friend." You stand slowly, knees cracking like old floorboards, and carry your tin cup back to the hearth. You pour the last of the cider onto the coals, letting it hiss softly. It smells faintly of spice and toast. Then, darkness. You snuff the lantern, tuck your shawl around your shoulders and crawl into bed beside the warmth of a brick you'd heated by the fire earlier. The taste of cheese still lingers, sharp, real, unforgettable. And somewhere in your belly, that apple nestles down like a lullaby. Your boots are off, your hands are finally clean, or at least, cleaner, and you're staring down a bowl of mush. You'd hoped for something fancier. Maybe a little pork. Maybe butter. But tonight is for hasty pudding. No, not the creamy vanilla dessert you might be picturing. This is cornmeal mush. Just water, salt, and coarse ground corn cooked until thick, bubbling, and stubbornly beige. You stir it slowly with a wooden spoon, watching it cling like it's afraid of being eaten. You've had this before. Every week, probably. Sometimes for breakfast, sometimes lunch. But it works just as well before bed, warm, filling, and as cheap as dirt. Cheaper, maybe, if you're growing the corn yourself. The pudding steams. You blow on it, impatient. It's bland, sure, but your stomach doesn't care about flavor right now. It wants weight. Bulk. The kind that settles into your middle and keeps you from waking up in the middle of the night with a growl in your gut. You add a splash of molasses, the dark ribbon winding through the mush like treasure. That's the trick. Molasses turns the humble hasty pudding into something vaguely resembling a treat. You swirl it in until it looks like muddy gold, then take a bite. Sweet. Earthy. Still a little lumpy. You close your eyes and chew slowly. There's a calm in the monotony. The soft clunk of the spoon on the bowl. The crackle of the hearth. Your own breathing, finally quiet. Historical side note, hasty pudding wasn't just a New England staple, it was practically a cultural symbol. It even made it into patriotic songs. Cornmeal was cheap and didn't need the expensive mills wheat did. It was fast, forgiving, and could feed a family with just one pot and a prayer. Colonists learned how to make this dish from Native Americans, who had long been boiling cornmeal into thick porridges like samp and suppawn. The Europeans brought their own spin, often using milk or adding sweeteners like honey or maple sugar. Sometimes they'd chill it overnight, slice it into slabs, and fry it the next day. Efficient cuisine. Historians still argue whether hasty pudding was considered poverty food or simply smart food. Maybe both. You suspect no one ever ate it by candlelight and called it glamorous, though. You take another spoonful. The molasses pools in the middle now, lazy and thick, resisting the heat. You poke at it gently, chasing sweetness in every bite. A flicker from the fire catches your eye. One of the logs collapses inward, and sparks float upward like sleepy fireflies. You don't flinch. You just stare, bowl in hand, spoon resting against your lip. This is one of those nights when dinner is less about eating and more about slowing down. The rhythm of the spoon. The heat in your belly. The safe silence after a day that ran you ragged. You can still smell the day on your clothes, hay, soap, maybe a hint of candle smoke. Your fingers smell like cornmeal now, and molasses clings under your nails like it's planning to stay a while. There's something oddly comforting about that. You lean back in your chair, bowl balanced on your palm, and let your mind wander. Maybe to the neighbor you saw earlier, bragging about having eggs to spare. Maybe to that dream you keep having about a house with glass windows and a door that doesn't creak. The pudding's cooling. You scrape the sides of the bowl, collecting the thickest bits, those starchy edges that stuck like paste. You chew slowly, methodically, not caring about the taste anymore. Just the texture. The act of eating itself. Here's something quirky. Some families added pumpkin to their hasty pudding in the fall, giving it a rich orange hue and a faint sweetness. Others steeped herbs in the cooking water, things like sage, mint, or even sassafras. One traveler once wrote about a pudding flavored with old onion peels and a curious dust. Hopefully not this one. You look down. Only a few bites left. You savor them, not because they're delicious, but because they mean you're almost done. You set the bowl aside and stretch your legs. The floor creaks. The air feels colder now. You grab the blanket you use as a shawl and drape it over your shoulders. And then, quietly, you burp. It's a small thing, but real, and deeply satisfying. You sit for a while, letting the pudding settle, listening to the sounds around you, the wind slipping through the cracks, the soft tick of cooling iron, the occasional drip from the roof. The silence between those sounds stretches out, inviting your thoughts to wander gently towards sleep. You picture tomorrow's breakfast, maybe more of the same, maybe fried mush if you're lucky. You wonder if you'll have time to gather more wood. You think about your boots and whether they'll be dry enough by morning. But mostly, you just sit. Heavy. Still. Warm in the belly. Sleep creeping in slow. The spoon slips from your hand and clinks against the bowl. It's time. Your eyes are half-lidded now, body sinking into the evening's quiet, but your fingers are busy, crumbling dry bread into a shallow tin bowl, the crusts breaking apart like old paper. This is no ordinary bedtime snack. You're making what folks call milk toast. Or, if you want to be dramatic about it, bread sop. The bread's hard. It's been sitting out for days on purpose, drying on the windowsill like some crunchy little project. No one in the house wastes fresh bread for this. You use the tired, the stale, the forgotten. That's part of the charm. You take the iron kettle off the hook, tilting it carefully, pouring just enough warm milk to cover the crumbs. The liquid sizzles softly as it hits the dry bread. The smell that floats up? Pure comfort. It's like childhood and wood smoke got together and whispered, "Shoo! Bedtime." You stir once with your spoon, gently, like tucking in a child. The bread doesn't dissolve, it softens. It blooms. The edges of the crust stay chewy, giving you something to work your jaw against. It's a small meal, humble and private, meant to be eaten slowly, while everything else in the world is finally still. You take your first bite. It's warm. Gentle. A little sweet from the milk, a little salty from the butter you stirred in when no one was looking. You lean back in your chair, chewing slowly, eyes drifting toward the hearth. Historical fact time: milk toast was a common end-of-day dish across the colonies. It required no cooking beyond heating milk, and used up leftover bread. For people without teeth, young children, elderly grandparents, anyone convalescing, it was ideal. Some even called it invalid food, which sounds rude but really meant tender and easy. But don't be fooled by its simplicity. There's something ritualistic about it. Breaking bread, warming milk, softening the day's edges. It was a nightly exhale. You stir your spoon through the soggy bread and watch it swirl like tiny clouds. The candle beside you burns low, the flame fluttering like it might doze off, too. And you start to feel the same. Weird detail incoming. Some folks, especially in the countryside, added a splash of beer or cider to their milk toast. A little fizz, a little funk. One diary even mentions ale sop, which sounds like an insult, but was just milk toast with warm beer. Historians still argue whether that counts as a proper dish or just someone's unfortunate experiment. You're not ready to test it tonight. You'll stick with plain milk. There's a rhythm to this snack. Bite, chew, breathe. Bite, chew, breathe. The warmth slides into your stomach and spreads out in slow waves. It's not exciting, not spicy or thrilling, but that's exactly the point. It's grounding. Predictable. Like brushing your hair or folding a quilt. You hear a floorboard creak in the next room. Probably the cat, or maybe just the house stretching in its sleep. You don't move. The spoon dips again. The bread starting to disappear into the milk, becoming a soft slurry, half liquid, half memory. You finish the bowl in quiet bites, scooping gently, mindful not to clink the metal too loud. It's the kind of food that makes your shoulders drop. That coaxes a sigh you didn't know you needed. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve and look at the empty bowl. Somehow, it looks satisfied too. You set it beside the hearth and stretch your arms overhead, the joints popping like distant firecrackers. A thought sneaks into your head. What if you sprinkled cinnamon on top next time? You smile. There's always tomorrow. Callback moment. Remember that bowl of dumplings from a few nights ago? This is like their quiet cousin. Less dramatic, less chewy, more like a gentle whisper at the end of the day. You toss a small piece of bread to the floor for the mouse that lives under the step. You don't even mind him tonight. Let him have his own bedtime story. You pull a quilt from the chair and wrap it around your shoulders like a cape. The corners drag on the floor as you walk toward your mattress, slow and content. Tonight, you didn't feast. But you were fed. And that matters. As you lie down, the last warmth of the milk toast curling gently in your belly, you think about how simple things often taste best when the world outside is hard. Bread. Milk. Heat. Silence. That's enough. The fire's nearly out now, just embers glowing like sleepy eyes, but you're still up, crouched near the hearth with a spoon in your hand and a small clay bowl balanced on your knee. It's thick, sticky, and dark. You scoop a bit and lick the edge of the spoon. Sweet. Smoky. Familiar. Tonight, your supper, and your dessert, frankly, is stewed beans and molasses. Don't wince. It's not as strange as it sounds. The beans were soaked earlier in the day, boiled until soft, then left to simmer low and slow with onions, maybe some salt pork if you had it. And the molasses? That's what ties it all together. Deep, earthy sweetness with just enough tang to make you pause. It's a flavor that clings to your tongue and curls into your brain like smoke. A little strange, a little bold, but undeniably warm. You take another bite. The beans are soft now, almost creamy inside, and the molasses has seeped into every crevice, caramelizing where the pot got hottest. It's not fancy. It's not elegant. But it's good. Real good. Historical fact time. Boston baked beans were already a tradition by the 18th century, especially among New England Puritans. They'd cook them on Saturdays and eat them cold on Sundays to avoid working on the Sabbath. Molasses, imported through the Triangle trade, was a staple sweetener. It was cheaper than refined sugar and had more personality. Some people added mustard or vinegar for bite. Others used brown bread as a sidekick, steamed in cans, dense and dark, made from rye and corn. A full belly before bed was a sacred thing. Curious detail ahead, in some households, beans and molasses weren't just dinner, they were breakfast and lunch, too. 3 times a day, if needed. And in certain regions, people topped theirs with apples or even poured milk over them once cooled. Historians still argue whether that last one was desperation or inspiration. You shift in your seat, careful not to spill, and I the last spoonful. You're full, but not done. Not quite. There's something about this meal that makes you linger. Maybe it's the way it sticks to the ribs. Or maybe it's that molasses, it always feels like it's telling you secrets. You drag the spoon through the bottom of the bowl, catching every last trace. You scrape up the bits that baked hard along the edge, charred, sugary, practically candy. You bite one. It crunches like brittle. You nod in approval. Dessert achieved. Your fingers are sticky now. You suck the molasses off one, absent-mindedly, eyes on the coals. The room smells like smoke and syrup. The spoon, warm from the fire, rests in your hand like a tool used well. You remember when molasses was a treat all by itself. A spoonful straight from the jug. Or poured onto snow and frozen into chewy ribbons. Not quite candy, not quite syrup. Kids would fight over the last drop. Adults too, if they were honest. You set the bowl down with a small thud and lean back. The floor's hard. Your belly's soft. You can feel the beans settling, low, solid, grounding. Callback moment, remember the apple and cheese from earlier in the week? That felt like a snack. This is a foundation. These beans could hold up a house. You stand and stretch, bones creaking like old floorboards. You grab a damp cloth and wipe your fingers, the molasses making tiny webs between them. It takes a while. That stuff is clingy. Like a cat that's decided your lap is its home now. A creak from above tells you someone else is stirring. Maybe they smelled the molasses. Or maybe your spoon tapping the bowl echoed a little too loudly. Either way, you don't speak. Let them dream. You cover the pot with a cloth and tuck the rest of the beans near the fire, letting them stay warm for tomorrow. Or breakfast. You haven't decided yet. As you move to bed, you swear the smell of molasses follows you. It clings to your clothes, your breath, your memory. You crawl under the quilt, still warm from the brick you set there earlier, and let the weight of the beans do its work. There's a heaviness now, but the good kind. The kind that pulls you down, not under. You think of brown bread in tin molds, of spoons dipped in syrup, of smoky pots simmering while the world outside freezes over. You think of molasses. Thick. Dark. Unapologetic. A taste that doesn't fade easily. You smile in the dark. You're in your shirt and long socks now, quilt pulled halfway over your lap, when you hear it, clink, clink. Someone's got the cider jug. You pause. Then smirk. You know that sound anywhere. A few minutes later, the jug finds you too, passed along quietly, without a word. It's cold to the touch, slippery with condensation, and you hold it for a moment before taking a sip. Tart. Sharp. A little fizzy. Still good. Tonight, it's not for celebration. It's for winding down. This is sleep cider, the scrappy cousin of wine and beer. Hard apple cider, maybe a few weeks into fermentation, maybe longer. Sweet if you're lucky. Vinegary if it's been forgotten too long. Either way, it gets the job done. You take another sip and feel it warm the edges of your brain. Cider at bedtime isn't strange here. In fact, it's expected. You didn't drink water if you could help it. It was often unsafe or just tasted like sadness. Cider? That was fruit, fermented and filtered, safer than most wells and tastier than any tea. Even kids had diluted versions. Historical fact detour. In 18th century America, cider was a household staple, especially in the colonies where apples grew like weeds. Many families made their own in small batches, storing it in barrels in the cellar. John Adams himself drank a glass of cider every morning. For strength, he claimed. Or maybe just to stay married. You set the jug down beside you and sigh. The taste lingers on your tongue, like spiced apples with secrets. You glance toward the window. Frost creeping up the glass. Somewhere, an owl calls once and falls silent. You take another sip. A little slower this time. This isn't party cider. No one's dancing. It's the kind of cider meant for sitting, for steeping in quiet. The kind that ends sentences, not starts them. Now for something strange. Some families spice their cider with cloves or cinnamon at night. Others warmed it and dropped in bits of butter or cream. One folk recipe even suggested boiling cider with dried snake root to calm fevers and wild thoughts. Historians still argue whether that worked or just gave people extra wild thoughts. You tuck the jug under your arm like a pet and shuffle a bit deeper under your quilt. A small burp escapes. Not ladylike. Not proud. But honest. Cider does that. The room is quieter now, your body warmer, your brain just soft enough around the edges. You stretch your toes and feel the heat from that earlier bean dinner still settling in your gut like a warm stone. Callback time, remember that milk toast? This is the opposite. That was gentle. This is bold. Both end in sleep, but take wildly different roads. You tilt the jug again. There's less now. You decide that's fine. You're not trying to drink the orchard dry. The candle near your bed gutters slightly, the wick sighing under its own weight. You let it. Shadows flicker on the wall in slow, drunken shapes. You blink once, slowly. Then again. You wonder about the apples that made this batch, where they grew, who picked them, if they were wormy. Probably. You smile. They still made good cider. You rub your thumb along the clay jug, tracing the rim absent-mindedly. Your breath fogs faintly in the air. Cold's coming in, slow but steady. The fire's mostly coals now. You'll need to pile in more wood tomorrow, or maybe just double the quilts. You look at the jug. One more sip. One more. It goes down smooth. Slightly sour, but it tingles pleasantly as it slides. A reminder that this drink is alive, just like you. Or trying to be. You set the jug gently on the floorboards and pull the quilt to your chin. Your limbs feel like they're drifting underwater. Your thoughts slow to a crawl. Not unpleasant. Just relaxed. Edges softened. Corners blurred. You could still hear the cider jug clinking your dreams, probably. You close your eyes. The room hums with the quiet of sleep-ready things. Cooled iron, distant wind, a mouse nesting in the corner, your own breath slowing to match the rhythm of rest. And somewhere, from someone else's room, another soft clink. It's making the rounds. You don't remember falling asleep, but you remember waking up, just long enough to feel the weight of the night pressing against your chest like a cat that's decided you're not moving. The fire is almost gone now. The last embers flicker with the determination of a kid who refuses to go to bed. You lie still. Not quite ready to surrender again. That's when you hear it, the unmistakable scrape of a pot being uncovered. Not clumsy or rushed, slow, deliberate, with the kind of stealth that says, no one needs to know about this. Someone's up, and someone's hungry. You pull the quilt off like it weighs 100 pounds and tiptoe your way across the cold floor. The boards protest under your feet, but not loud enough to stop you. You find the pot where you expected it, tucked just beside the hearth, wrapped in a cloth. Still warm. And inside? Corn mush. Thick. Dense. Just waiting to be fried. You smile, sleepy and satisfied. You grab the skillet, add a little lard, and slice off 2 palm-sized patties from the cold mush. They hit the pan with a hiss. A sizzling whisper of approval. Tonight, you're making mush cakes. You don't even need to explain it to yourself. This is second supper behavior. It's for people who already had dinner, already had dessert, already maybe dipped into the cider, but somehow still want something before sleep takes over completely. The cakes start to brown. You tilt your head, watching the edges crisp, golden, and lacy. You flip them with a pocket knife, because a spatula is too loud and anyway, who's watching? Historical fact interlude: corn mush, also called hasty pudding or Indian pudding, was a staple in colonial kitchens, made by boiling cornmeal in water or milk until it thickened like porridge. Leftover mush was chilled and fried the next day into cakes or fritters. Cheap, filling, and practically indestructible. You sit cross-legged on the floor, the pan in front of you, and pick up the first mush cake. No plate. This is a hand situation. It's hot and crisp on the outside, soft and steaming in the center. You tear a bite, blow on it, then chew slowly. It tastes like corn and smoke. And thyme. You sprinkle a little salt. Consider molasses. Decide against it. This is a savory night. Weird tidbit time. Some colonists added chopped onions or pork cracklings to their corn mush cakes for extra flavor. Others, braver or more desperate, stirred in leftover fish. One 18th century cookbook even suggested adding dried rose petals to please the eye and the gut alike. Historians still argue whether that was poetic or just reckless. You chew slowly, savoring the quiet crackle of crisp corn beneath your teeth. It's earthy. Honest. The kind of food that doesn't lie to you. It's not pretending to be anything but what it is: corn, heat, and hunger. You glance toward the door. Still closed. Still quiet. Whoever started this midnight mission is long gone. Maybe they got their bite and slipped back under the covers. Maybe they're still lurking in the shadows, waiting their turn at the pan. You hold the last cake in your hand, flipping it from palm to cool it. You don't need to eat it. But you want to. That's reason enough. Callback check-in. Remember that warm cider buzz from earlier? This is the landing pad. Cider lifted you. Mush cakes bring you back down. Gently. Like a sack of potatoes lowered by someone who cares. You finish the cake, lick your fingers, and set the pan aside. You don't wash it. You wouldn't dare. That flavor? Earned. You stand, stretch, yawn like a bear with somewhere to be. The mush settles in your belly like a comforting rock. You wonder how many people across the colonies are doing the exact same thing right now, sneaking quietly into kitchens, crisping up leftovers in iron pans, eating by firelight with their knees pulled up and their eyes half closed. Probably more than you'd think. It's a tradition older than the United States. Older than you. Older than even the name America. Just people, needing something solid before they let go for the night. You tiptoe back toward the bed, the floor a little less cold now that you're full. The blanket greets you like an old friend. The mush cakes sit warmly in your memory, right beside that bowl of dumplings, the cider jug, the milk toast. Little edible bookmarks in the story of your week. You burrow deeper under the covers, eyes fluttering shut. The fire gives one last sigh. So do you. Sleep takes its cue. It's not quite morning yet, but something stirred you again. Not a sound, not a dream. Just that faint, ghostly tug of appetite. Not hunger, exactly. More like longing. For warmth. For sweetness. For the comfort of something familiar. You reach over and grab the small cloth bundle left near the hearth, one someone wrapped earlier with casual precision. Inside? A leftover slice of apple pandowdy. Cold, yes, but still calling your name. You know the deal, it's yesterday's dessert. Today's midnight prize. You bite in. The crust has gone soft with syrup, the apples have settled, grown more tender and spiced. It tastes like fall never ended. This is a colonial classic, not quite a pie, not quite a cobbler. Somewhere in between, like a dessert that never learned to color inside the lines. Historical fact time. Apple pandowdy was common across 18th century America, especially in regions where apples grew in abundance. It was a rustic, no-fuss dessert, sliced apples spiced with cinnamon or nutmeg, topped with pastry or biscuit dough, and then dowdied, that is, broken up midway through baking so the crust mixed into the fruit and syrup. The result? A bubbling mess of delicious chaos. You eat it cold, with your fingers. Like an outlaw. No regrets. Even cooled, the molasses-sweetened syrup clings to your teeth. Bits of apple, once crisp, now melt on your tongue. And the crust? A little soggy, sure, but it has character. It tells you where it's been. What fire baked it? Who didn't wait for it to cool? You wipe your fingers on the edge of your blanket and smile. You remember how it was made, how the apples were peeled slowly, with a paring knife sharpened on the back step. How someone insisted on adding nutmeg even though you only had the faintest scrap left, grated down to a whisper. How the kitchen filled with steam and sugar, and everyone lingered near the oven just a little too long. Strange but true detour, some early versions of pandowdy used savory crusts, or included vinegar or lemon peel to excite the senses late in the day. Others were baked in cast iron over hearth coals, with lids heaped in ashen embers to crisp the top. One variation involved dousing the finished dessert with cream and rum. Historians still argue whether that was a garnish or a survival tactic. You eat slowly, savoring the way it wraps around your tired brain like a lullaby in syrup form. The house groans slightly in the wind. You pull the blanket tighter. The slice is gone now, but the feeling remains. You feel anchored. Settled. Like your soul has a belly and it's been filled. Callback carousel, remember the fried mush cakes? They were grounding. The cider, a gentle fog. The pandowdy? This is closure. A sweet final page before the lights dim. You sigh through your nose. The blanket's warm again. Your pillow, a perfect cradle. You sink back, satisfied. Your fingers are sticky, but in that good way. Like after licking the spoon from a batter bowl as a kid. You roll onto your side. Eyes flutter. The smell of apples still lingers in the room, real or imagined. You decide not to question it. Sleep calls again, but softer this time. No urgency. Just the slow, familiar whisper of it. Like molasses over hot bread. You let it come. The light outside is still a soft, inky blue when your eyes flicker open for the briefest moment. You don't move. You're too comfortable, limbs heavy, and heat locked beneath your blanket. But your brain, greedy thing, is curious. It remembers something. Bread pudding. Left on the back of the hearth last night. still warm when someone tucked it under that old knit cloth to keep it from drying out. You close your eyes tighter, trying to will the craving away. No use. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed and groan, quietly. Floor's colder than ever. The fire's gone to ghosts. But that pudding's still in reach. You shuffle over in your socks, guided more by smell memory than sight. There it is. Thick, golden, slumped slightly in its tin dish like it gave up trying to hold itself together overnight. You respect that. You lift the cloth and inhale. Egg. Bread. Cinnamon. Maybe a little dried currant. Maybe a lot. You don't remember. Doesn't matter. You dig in with a spoon that someone left sticking out, bent just a little at the neck like it's tired too. The pudding is soft, dense but forgiving. It tastes like someone melted a cinnamon bun and rebuilt it with intention. You chew slowly, eyes still half shut. This is not a dish for the awake. It's made for this twilight state, warm, sweet, gentle as a whisper. Historical fact pause. In colonial America, bread pudding was a thrifty solution for stale bread, nothing wasted. Mixed with milk, eggs, molasses or sugar, and often spices if available, it could stretch modest ingredients into something rich and comforting. Sometimes baked in cast iron, sometimes in ceramic. It wasn't fancy, but it was beloved. You pause, spoon hovering. A raisin dangles precariously. You eat it anyway. It sticks to your tooth a little. You decide you like it better that way. Weird fact interlude: some early American cooks added suet, beef fat, to their bread puddings to make them more filling for the evening. Others stirred in mashed apples or pumpkin. One especially rogue recipe included pickled lemon rind. Historians still argue whether that was creative genius or a kitchen cry for help. You keep eating. Not fast. Not because you're hungry. But because it makes the quiet deeper, the room warmer. This isn't a dessert you serve. This is a dessert you share, between people who know how to whisper across a table or pass a dish without comment. The spoon scrapes the bottom. You don't chase every last bit. You're not a savage. You sit for a moment, letting the sweetness linger. There's something about cinnamon in the dark, it feels braver. Like it's holding the line until morning comes. You wrap the dish again, careful, almost ceremonial. Set it back in its place. The floor creaks under you, a warning in a lullaby. You shuffle back toward the bed, steps slower now, heavier. Sleep isn't far. You feel it behind your eyes like a rising tide. Callback carousel keeps turning. Remember the milk toast? This pudding is the grown-up cousin. Softer, richer, and somehow sadder. Not in a bad way. In the way a lullaby is sad. Because it knows it's meant to end. You lie down. The spoon's still in your hand. You let it fall to the floor with a soft tap. That feels right. Your pillow finds the crook of your neck like it's been waiting. You smile into the darkness. The pudding is still in your chest. Not literally, hopefully. But it's there, nestled in that space where food becomes memory, and memory becomes quiet. Your breathing slows. Eyes close. Outside, the wind hushes. Even it's taking a break. Inside, nothing moves. And inside you, all is still. The room is velvet dark now, and you're slipping in and out of dreams like a leaf bobbing along a quiet stream. But again, you stir. You've been trying to resist it. The pull. The whisper. But let's be honest, you've been waiting for this one. There, tucked behind the flour sack in the pantry, is the real treasure of the late-night table. Cheese and pickles. Not just any cheese, sharp, crumbly farmhouse cheddar, wax-sealed and cured to bite like it's got something to prove. And the pickles? They're not the sweet kind. These are the kind that slap. Vinegar heavy. Spiced with cloves and mustard seed. Cut thick. You creep barefoot toward the pantry, the wood cold but familiar now, like a friend you bicker with daily. You move quietly. This isn't a loud meal. This is a midnight negotiation. You pull the cloth back from the cheese wheel and slice a wedge with your smallest knife. It breaks unevenly, as it should. You pop the first chunk in your mouth before you even reach the counter. Salt. Fat. Sharp as a bell in a quiet church. Then come the pickles. Pulled straight from the crock, cool and sour, heavy with brine and memory. You drop 2 on a plate like coins at a toll booth. You've paid your fare. Now eat. Historical bite of truth. In 18th century America, cheeses were made in large wheels, pressed in linen and aged in cellars. They were prized possessions, bartered, gifted, and sometimes locked up. Pickles, on the other hand, were the colonial survival tool, preserving cucumbers, beans, onions, even watermelon rinds in brine to last through lean months. Pickled food before bed wasn't weird, it was practical. And delicious. You sit by the pantry door, lit only by the halo of the embers you stirred back to life. Cheese in one hand, pickle in the other. One bite, then the other. Crunch, chew, repeat. You're not just eating. You're building contrast. Playing flavors like cards. Here comes the quirky. Some colonists believed pickles sobered the mind before rest and warded off bad dreams. One diary claimed, "A pickled onion before sleep shall keep the devil at the footboard." Historians still argue whether that was metaphor, medicine, or straight-up midnight panic. You chuckle softly, thinking of your footboard. Empty. For now. The cheese is stubborn in your teeth. The kind you suck at long after it's gone. The pickles sting in all the right places. This is not a child's snack. This is full-grown midnight wisdom. Salty. Sour. Quietly defiant. Callback clink, remember the sweet milk toast? The syrupy apple pandowdy? The hush of bread pudding? This is the opposite pole. The other end of the spectrum. These flavors shout into the silence, but in a respectful way. Like a protester who brings their own trash bag and cleans up afterward. You polish off the last pickle. Wipe your fingers on your undershirt like some dignified raccoon. And sit there, chewing the last taste of vinegar off your tongue. It burns slightly. You lean into it. There's something satisfying about ending the night with a bite that reminds you you're still alive. Your eyes start to close again, and you rise, slower now, heavier, the way cheese likes to settle into your bones. You nudge the pantry door closed with your heel, mindful of the latch that always clicks too loud. The fire is quieter now, but it nods at you with sleepy approval. You nod back. Back under the covers. Back in the cocoon. The air is cooler now, the cheese still ghosting across your taste buds. This time, sleep doesn't ask permission. It just takes you. No protest. No regrets. You wake up to something strange. Not sound. Not cold. Just stillness. The kind that almost feels like it's waiting for you. Like the world is holding its breath, watching to see what you'll do next. You blink into the shadows, eyes adjusting. Everything is exactly where it was. The fire, just embers now, pulsing like the last beat of a lullaby. The blanket, warm around your shoulders. The weight of your body, perfectly held by the mattress. But deep inside, something tugs. And you know what it is. A last ritual. A final comfort. One more slow turn of the wheel before morning creeps in. A warm drink. You rise without sound, muscle memory guiding you. The small iron pot is still by the hearth. Someone left it full. Bless them. Inside, a thick, honeyed mixture of warm milk, nutmeg, and just enough rum to make your cheeks pink. It's called milk posset. And you're about to understand why some folks swore it was magic. You nudge the embers with the poker, set the pot in the coals, and wait. The scent rises fast, creamy, nutty, with that unmistakable rum glow beneath it. Historical fact check. Milk posset dates back to the Middle Ages and remained a colonial favorite. Originally a curdled milk drink thickened with wine or ale and sweetened with spices, it evolved over time into a more comforting, pudding-like treat. By the 1700s, possets were commonly used as a nightcap or resting tonic in American homes. Warm milk, a touch of booze, and maybe an egg or two whisked in. Yours is simpler. Just milk, honey, nutmeg, and a splash of rum. It bubbles gently. You pour it into a pewter cup, and the steam curls toward your face like a lazy cat. You sip. It's thick. Sweet. Warm in a way that isn't just temperature, it's like warmth is a language, and this drink is whispering it directly into your bloodstream. Now for the quirky part, some colonial recipes insisted on adding bread crusts, egg yolks, even beer foam to milk possets. Others swore by whisking the mixture 13 times clockwise and once counter to ward off fevers. Historians still argue whether posset was a culinary invention or an alchemical bedtime ritual with side effects like snoring and vivid dreams of turnips. You sip again, and this time, your whole chest relaxes. You lean against the wall, holding the warm metal cup with both hands. It's almost too hot to touch. Almost. You sit there for a while, not thinking. Just feeling. The drink swirls in your belly like velvet. The nutmeg starts to cloud your head. Not in a dizzy way, more like a fog rolling in, soft and slow, blotting out the clutter. Outside, the night finally starts to fade. Not light yet, but the dark isn't quite as deep. The shape of things begins to return: the window frame, the outline of the table, the curve of the kettle's shadow. You finish the cup, careful not to slurp. That would break the spell. Call back cozy. Remember the cider? The warm ale with spices? This posset is the final note in that sleepy symphony. It doesn't shout. It hums. A lull in liquid form. You set the cup on the mantel. The fire gives one last sigh. Then it's back to bed, one last time. The pillow greets your cheek like it never left. You feel yourself unraveling. Not falling apart, just coming undone in the best possible way. A thread snipped here. A knot released there. You melt into the blanket. Your body exhaling even before your lungs do. And now, you're not hungry anymore. Not restless. Not curious. Just full. Of warmth. Of softness. Of stories and salt and sugar and sleep. All that's left is silence. And the slow, sweet tumble into dreams. Somewhere between dreaming and waking, you feel it, the gentle push of morning trying to return. But not yet. Not while the sky is still navy blue. Not while your limbs feel like stone under the covers, and the air around you is still flavored with wood smoke and last night's cinnamon. You burrow deeper, but a familiar tickle at the edge of your thoughts says there's one final ritual, one last edible tether to tug you gently from the edge of sleep. You smile before you even sit up. Molasses crumbles. Little chunks of dense, sweet cake left on a wooden plate by the hearth. You remember breaking them off one by one after dinner, your thumb sticky, your jaw working overtime to chew through the syrupy grit. These aren't for guests. They're not plated with care or cut in tidy squares. They're chunks. Scraps. The stubborn edges from the baking pan where molasses met cast iron and turned into something halfway between cake and candy. They're better than dessert. They're survival snacks for the soul. You shuffle over slowly, barely awake. There they are. Cold now, but still powerful. You bite into one and feel the sugar snap back at you like it's been waiting all night. Historical snapshot: molasses was the backbone of many colonial sweeteners. Imported from the West Indies, it was cheaper than refined sugar and used in everything from baked beans to rum to gingerbread. Crumbles like these weren't formal recipes, just the leftover bits from larger molasses bakes, often scooped into a bowl and picked at during long winter evenings. You chew slowly. The flavor is deep. Almost burnt. Almost bitter. Like someone cooked brown sugar until it developed opinions. Your teeth stick together a little, but that's part of the charm. The texture's a dare: eat me slowly, or risk losing a filling. And here comes the French twist. Some cooks added a splash of vinegar to molasses cake to make it bite back. Others mixed in black pepper or even dried mustard to chase away nighttime ailments. Historians still argue whether these were acts of culinary boldness or side effects of eating dinner by candlelight without reading glasses. You chased the crumble with a sip of cold water. Your tongue practically applauds the contrast. And then, quite naturally, you sit there. Quiet. Still. Remembering each thing you tasted tonight, not as a list, but as a series of flavors that shape the spaces between thoughts. The slippery comfort of milk toast. The tang of cider from a wooden mug. The ooze of cheese. The crackle of pork cracklings. The molasses that still clings to your molars like a bedtime story you don't want to end. You're not just full. You're storied. Your body has become a little museum of colonial cravings and sleepy rituals. Callback carousel, final spin. You remember the bread pudding, how it slumped like a tired dog. The pickles that stood guard against nightmares. The milk posset that closed the curtain with a curtain call. And now, this, sweet, stubborn molasses. The final act. The bow before lights out. You rise, slowly. No rush now. No hunger left to chase. You slide back under the covers with the grace of someone who has absolutely no regrets. A sugar-dusted ghost of a smile still hovering on your lips. The light outside is changing. A little less ink, a little more steel. But that's not your problem yet. You're warm. You're wrapped in the afterglow of ancient snacks. You're carried by flavors that once filled cabins and taverns, bedrooms and barns. You are, for this last moment, a time traveler whose passport is your taste buds. You sigh, long and low. And then you let go. Let go of the fire. Let go of the spoon. Let go of the crumbs. Let go of the night. You drift down into sleep, not empty, but full. And the last thing you feel is the softest tug at the corners of your mouth. Because you know you'll be back. Night will fall again. And the pantry will still be there. Waiting. Let everything slow now. Loosen the grip on thoughts that no longer need to be held. Imagine the fire has gone completely cold, but the warmth lingers on the stones. Imagine the last taste of molasses fading into something like memory, something too sweet to name. Let the room stretch outward until it becomes a field, and the field becomes a dream, and the dream becomes weightless. Your body sinks deeper into the bed with every breath, like it's being tucked in by the air itself. The walls of the house are still. The wind has stopped knocking. Even the mice, if there are any, have curled into sleep. The food is done. The table is cleared. Your eyes grow heavy. And in this slow drift, somewhere between now and not yet, you are safe. Let the past fade. Let the flavors blur. Let yourself go. You've done enough tonight. You've tasted the echoes. You've heard the hush. And now, you rest. Let your breath steady. Let the hush win. You're home. You're full. You're free.